All right, hello everybody. Welcome to another developer interview. With me today, I have the two developers from Analgesic Productions, Marina and Sean.
Hello.
Hi.
So I guess just a kind of slew of questions just to get the ball rolling. I guess I would say like, who are you, where you from, and why do you make video games?
Yeah, so we're Analgesic Productions, although we live on different ends of the earth. I'm Sean Hantani. I'm from Chicago, or the suburbs of Chicago, and then Chicago. And I make games because I started because it was interesting, but Marina and I have a really unique working, I guess, teamwork and a unique output that I think is very memorable and unique. And I think it's valuable for the medium that we continue to work together on producing new games.
And yeah, I'm Marina. I grew up in Chicago and right now I'm based in Minneapolis. And why I make games, I guess as a kid I grew up always really interested in games and interested in kind of how they're made and expressing my own ideas. And I feel like it's changed as I've gotten older and had opportunities to make games. And I feel differently about video games now.
Yeah.
But I think in a weird way, if you find a good dynamic with someone like what Sean and I have, then they can be very efficient in terms of the kind of scope of project that you can create in a video game.
Yeah.
With sort of...
Especially when it's just just the two of you have to communicate. You don't have a large teams. There's very little room for miscommunication there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess the type of the scope of the story that we could tell in Anodyne 2, for instance, is very different than what we would be able to do trying to create a movie or something like that, where with a game a lot of the animation of it is the player playing it, and then you just have to create a walk cycle or something. And so if you're kind of tricky about it, you can create a story with a really big scope with a really small team.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more you can tell in a video game because firstly, a movie can only be so long before the runtime is, too much of an investment. But a game is something you can keep coming back to in a way like a TV series is, but you can go a lot longer than a TV show is with it just being one package that people just kind of consume altogether.
Games are interesting because you can produce stuff that is consumed for as long or longer than TV series, but potentially smaller teams can do it. When I think about the logistics of making a film, it's very frightening, I guess, because there's so many people involved and funding is so hard to find.
It's a wonder that those things even get made. The amount of people that have to cooperate and coordinate and how many people have to be doing their job right for those things to even happen. So I guess I'll ask, how long have you two known each other?
A while.
We met through a mutual friend. We met through email, essentially.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who meets through email?
I mean, basically, a friend of Sean's from, was it middle school and high school?
Yeah.
Went to my college. Sean and I didn't go to the same college, undergrad, and that friend knew that Sean was looking for an artist for a game that was ultimately the prototype of Anodyne.
Oh, I see.
And yeah, and so the mutual friend talked to a few of me and some other friends about oh, there's this friend looking for an artist, and I was really interested in that because I had been kind of hobbyist working on game projects for a long time, but with my limitations programming wise would always hit a wall.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I reached out to Sean and then we started working together, and that was in 2012, I think.
So you two must both
be
quite a little bit older than I am if you're in college in 2012, because I was still in high school in 2012. That was my last year of high school.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 2012, I just finished second year of college.
Okay.
Marina was a year ahead of me, but we graduated at the same time.
Right on. So Anodyne 1 must have been your first actual like official project that was something that you put out.
It
Yeah,
was
like,
for
I
me.
had
Sean
put out-
had some.
I meant yeah,
Some
I meant like
Flash
together,
games.
the two of you
Yeah.
Have
together.
you seen
Yeah.
my dark history of really?
No, I
Sean had like
haven't.
Newgrounds Flash games.
Oh
Or, well,
god.
there's nothing particularly that good, but it's like, I don't know, it's interesting and it's still out there.
I mean,
Yeah.
like everybody practices like their medium just by making garbage. Like when I was in, I started making YouTube videos when I was in 7th grade. I made like they're all gone now, but I would make these like James Bond parodies with my friends called James Blonde, and I wish I still had them. But like, yeah, everyone like has just this awful trash they made as a kid. I was gonna say something else. I
You
forget
mean-
though.
Extraordinary masterpieces.
Yeah.
They are definitely like art in some sense, I'm sure.
All been downhill from them.
Yeah. In high school, with my baby brother, I made movies about him being a spy.
Oh
And
yeah.
he was like between like
Oh.
I forget 3 and 5 years old or something like that.
Hmm.
And I would just like feed him a line at a time, and we would take, and it was just like making it up as we went, taking shots.
Yeah. It's literally
Was-
like anything I've ever did in like film school. We would literally make up the lines as we go because we're too
Uh-huh.
lazy to like write anything.
I did that once in middle school too. It's on my YouTube, but it's private, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Sean, so you've been in game dev a little longer than Marina. Then I know you did a short collaboration with Jack King Spooner.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that was after
that was-
our other games.
Oh, okay.
Or
was-
Anodyne, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Probably during
I think-
even the Ocean Dev.
yeah. That was so Marina. I think Marina has been casually making games longer than I have.
Yeah,
but
I have been
I
since
sort of
I was like a child.
But yeah, Jack King Spooner and I did. I think it was that would have been the very start of 2015. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Jack was. How familiar you are with his project?
I'm very familiar with his work in general because I've played a number of his games, and like he's actually the other one that I interviewed like a year or so
Yeah.
ago.
Or so that advent. I think it was an advent calendar project. I'm trying to remember the context of it. But basically, I believe we provided a short script of some idea we have, and then maybe like a handful of things to interact with.
Hmm.
And then he created kind of a little theater set of those things happening. So that was an interesting
Oh.
kind of like asynchronous development. So he basically gave a bunch of developers a prompt, and I wrote some dialogue for it, and I wrote the things I wanted to appear on screen. And I think I might have done a few of the sprites, but he's the one who put it into the game and kind of gave it the tone.
Yeah.
And then he released these over a period of time. So mine, I'm trying to, I should have reviewed this right before, but I believe mine was at the time during Even the Ocean. So Even the Ocean development was very long, and part of this was because of the game itself being overscoped a bit, but part of it was also just because we were doing a lot of other stuff in our lives at the time. At least I was.
Yeah.
And part of that was like writing fiction. So I was kind of getting into writing fiction. Like I think I wrote a novel while making Even the Ocean. It wasn't very good. It's on itch.io, but I also wrote some short stories, and one of them I think was about like some weird experiment where like people got put into rooms to like post on Twitter or something.
What?
And it's
that's
I don't
that's
think
interesting.
yeah, it was something like I can't remember exactly what it was, but if you play that game, which is it should still be up there, then you can get a sort of gist for it. I don't think this
Yeah.
short story I ever published it anywhere, but it was like a weird little sci-fi thing.
Okay. It kind of sounds like
Yeah.
you ever heard of the movie Cube?
Yeah, wait, is that it has like they're trying to like they're in like a cube room and they try to go through different
Yeah.
Room?
I was gonna say it sounds like
Yeah,
a
okay.
social media version of that.
I kind of want to revisit what I actually did with that and what happened to that short story. But I
Yeah.
do remember that the other games, there was some. I would actually assign that when I used to teach at the School of the Art Institute in Chicago. I actually would assign that project sometimes
Okay.
for students to look at because it was a really interesting format.
So you actually you taught before too.
Yeah, I stopped teaching this May, and I meant to write an article, but never got around to it. But yeah.
Okay. So I guess we'll move on to my second question here. So I've written out here that like, you know, some indie devs make the entire game by themselves. Other have like a larger team. We kind of touched up on this on a little bit earlier, but like to elaborate, like what's it like working together as a pair? Like what's a two-person dynamic in game development like versus like doing it by yourself or doing it with a larger team of people?
I think it's like really nice as long as you work well together with the person, which is, I guess, true of any situation. But the particular advantages of a two-person situation are how if you do communicate, then like it's all very efficient, because as if anyone says anything to anyone else, then everyone knows. Basically.
Yeah.
And so that's really great. And for me, it's better than one in general for a video game type project, not only because of the like skills that are involved in like reducing the number of hats that need to be worn, but also because like we've built up this sort of like rapport of like trust, and then also of wanting to kind of fulfill or like make good on the work that the other person is doing. And so there's kind of a back and forth of energy and kind of inspiration between the different sides that we have to what we're doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of back and forth and discussion, a lot of vetting of like ideas of game design and like story stuff. So there has to be a lot of like trust there, and also willingness to like hear various criticisms and ideas. But I think the reason that games from pairs of two or three, they turn out quite stronger is because you kind of get the benefits of like feedback, as well as the benefits of like very good communication. Like there's not a lot of like signal loss going back and forth between two people.
I never really considered that, like having someone like always there to kind of like doing an ongoing criticism of your work.
Yeah.
And like vice versa, because I get that a lot too. Like sometimes I'll like do like a quick joke in a video or something, and I'll just send that to a couple of friends to be like, "Is this funny? Could the timing be better?" But I guess like having someone that you're working with to always have that is definitely a very valuable thing.
Yeah, I imagine that's why like there's a lot of great like music collaborations, just because people feedback a lot.
Okay, so how's like the workload kind of split between you two? Because you mentioned you have two different skill sets. Sean, I know you mostly do like the programming. Marina, you're more like the artwork and the writing.
But we're mixing things up for a new game.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How's that going?
It's going well. Yeah, so normally I do like the bulk of the writing and kind of generally narrative lead. But then, for our next untitled project, Sean is the narrative lead. And so that's pretty exciting. And I think part of how that's working out is that like for Anodyne 2, I really put a lot of myself into that game. And I feel like I felt like a little like wiped out or like emptied out after we released, and
as if you like kind of like dumped everything out that was in your brain all out into that thing.
All the stuff that I had been like processing and working through in my life. And so we were definitely like like I don't know what we're gonna do next, and kind of we'll come back to it. But then we started having some ideas, and then Sean had some ideas, and so we kind of decided that Sean could lead on the narrative, and that's been a nice feeling for me, because I'm like, oh, we can keep working on something, but I can also be living my life and like kind of like creating new material to tell stories about, and I don't need to like immediately try to like pull from my dry well of life experience.
Yeah. So, Sean, you've even done, like, music for the games, too.
Yeah, I do all the music.
So I was gonna ask, like, your music seems, like, very ambient, which I think, like, complements, like, the art direction really well in a lot of your games. Do you have, like, any particular influences for, like, of like, your music? And Marina for, like, your artwork and your I mean, you already said that you like kind of pulled from your own experiences for like the narrative, but for like artwork, what kind of like influences do you guys usually pull from?
I like to listen to a lot of like experimental, like underground electronic music, and I don't mean like, you know, showed up on a blog, but I mean like going through someone's SoundCloud likes and seeing the random songs of like 5 plays that someone likes or something.
Oh.
But then
I see.
there's also like more popular electronic music I like. There's this one electronic artist, Japanese artist named Rei Harakami that I listen to a lot and has kind of been an influence on a lot of game music that I've written. So it depends on the game, but for like Anodyne 2, I listened to like Panzer Dragoon Saga for a bit, but then I was also listening to some like pop music, like PC Music, the kind of music label, a lot of like experimental electronic stuff, and then other game soundtracks like Dandara was a recent platformer from the beginning of this year I can't remember.
Is it the one where like the guy can like stick to the walls in the ceiling?
Yeah, that's an
Yeah,
interesting
I have
soundtrack.
seen that thing. That does look really. I haven't heard the soundtrack, but that game does look really interesting.
There's a lot of things. I have a notepad document somewhere with like. Yeah, I'll let Marina talk about the art.
Yeah, I think as far as the art, basically there's a lot of Google image searching. Yeah, I guess it depends a lot on the game. So for Anodyne, when everything was filtered through kind of pixel art, really low res style,
Yeah.
I would like look at a lot of like Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance type games.
Yeah, because you're definitely like channeling that whole like Link's Awakening vibe, and with that one.
Yeah, and then I definitely like I definitely tried to both lean heavily on like those influences when I couldn't figure out, or I think especially for the sprite work when I was trying to like communicate a certain shape in a really small spot. But then for the backgrounds, in some ways I tried to like fight against those influences and not make it look just like them. And really,
This is gonna sound like a weird comparison, but it reminds me of like seeing people that can actually build good looking stuff in Minecraft. They don't just adhere to the shapes. They kind of try to create these more abstract like houses using like stuff that isn't necessarily like house material, like fences and stuff. And then when you pull back, it looks more like a house instead of just block Lego thing.
Yeah, totally. Growing up, I played with Legos and a lot of other building toys a lot, and I was always really into the types of Lego connections that were like sort of like weird ones. Like, you know how you can like stick a Lego, like a skinny one, sideways onto like the tops of another
Oh
Lego.
yeah.
So like that kind of thing, I was always really into.
Kind of like bending the rules a little bit to make like more interesting things.
Yeah. And so I guess ultimately like the various things will have different influences. Like the main fields area in Anodyne is like based on kind of like Van Gogh field paintings.
Okay. That's interesting.
The like motif of the sort of like rocky wall that shows up in Van Gogh paintings that is lifted almost directly, and you can see it in a few places.
I'm definitely gonna look for that now. But I was also gonna say it's really interesting, like just discussing like trying to convey like a lot of person or character in such a small space, because you find that area that has like the older sprites of Young that like I guess were like earlier drafts. It's definitely not like that. Like he's a little more slender and tall, and you kind of see the process of you like refining that into a space that's like smaller.
Yeah, I think some of those are actually Sean's prototypes.
Oh, really?
Oh, I think out of I know the area you're talking about. It was.
It was, yeah. It's kind of a spoiler,
that-
though.
so-
I might bleep that out.
Okay. We can cut that. The sprites there, some of them, I'm pretty sure one of them is an old Young sprite that Marina made. One of them is also the one with the green shirt that looks really bad. That's the one I made. But there's also, I think also there's a character from a previous game I made called Inspiration Dave,
Okay.
which which is not.
Which is what we were talking about. The like.
Yeah, that's the skinny thing I think you're
Flash.
referring to, and that wasn't for Anodyne, but that was just kind of a sprite I pulled out
Oh, I see.
for that
'Cause
area.
I just assumed it was just an early design of Young that just completely didn't look like him.
I mean, which is like a good. I mean, it's like I don't think anyone would know that it was from that game unless they have somehow played it.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't. I just me and everyone I know who played the game and got to that area just like assumed, oh, that's what Young looked like before.
Beyond specific influences for specific areas, I would say that sort of the conceptual pieces that make up a scene, like I feel like in general I don't make a lot of props, and like part of that is just workload and being like one artist, but
Yeah.
a lot of it is just like trying to like capture the like essence of the feel of being an area rather than trying to
Yeah.
recreate sort of realistically what would or should be there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think a lot about the quality of the light and kind of like the a word that like comes to my mind a lot is like humidity when I'm thinking about areas.
Okay.
And just like in a very broad sense, like what the air feels like, and
Yeah.
kind of the sort of like the scent and the like temperature and dampness and like the way that the air affects the light. And so like those are a lot of the time I'll like have a very specific memory in mind of like being in a certain type of place that made me feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And then trying to communicate that through art.
That's a really interesting way of putting that, actually. And all I'm thinking about right now is I live in Nova Scotia, which is completely surrounded by water. So we get a lot of rain here, and there's like a lot of humidity here. And with that in mind, like thinking about going out in the humid weather in the summer, like that definitely like makes me think of like certain colors, certain ways of like light could look in that environment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting to hear Marina talk about that because it's a pretty similar process for the music. Like, I don't know when I started doing this, but I used to listen to music a lot when going everywhere, which I think is what's common, but at some point in the past decade, I basically never listen to music when I'm outside.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of trying to collect a lot of like the feel of various spaces, not just visually, but also like audio-wise, and think about that. And then what I do when listening to music is I tend to pick out a few aspects of a song that I think represent a particular image well. And by doing that, then when it comes time to write music for an area, like usually I wait for Marina to have the art because I feel like there's a higher success rate of not having to redo the song.
Yeah.
And if I have that visual, then it's pretty easy. I just have to kind of think about music I've heard and like find like maybe like 3 to 5 song references and pick out some elements I like and think about how I can create my own synth sounds that kind of represent those and bind that into a new song or something.
That's really cool because
Yeah.
and now that you mention it, like I definitely feel like every area I'm in like either Anodyne game, I feel like the music fits that area really well. But like a lot of people don't really think about it, but like I like to imagine like music definitely does have like a language, like certain instruments, or maybe not like literal instruments in the sense of like creating music digitally, but like they definitely like could represent different things. Like one example I came up with in a video when I was trying to like kind of communicate this idea in a way that could make sense to like, you know, just the average person, is I used an example from Sonic Adventure 2 when you're walking through the space colony, and it's this very like mellow ambient kind of synth to it, but then there's this guitar over it, and it's as if like the guitar is like Eggman kind of like trotting through this like once peaceful place and kind of blowing it up, is kind of what that feels like to me.
The composition method that I think a lot of like classical musicians used to use, or I mean people still use it, but it's like when you're doing like classical music analysis, it's a way of kind of reading into the various choices that the composers made.
Yeah.
And I think it's definitely something that like game composers do as well, because you're trying to capture various elements about the scene.
Yeah, there's in like Steven Universe music, there's like a very direct like language with the main characters where they're each represented by different instruments that kind of like feature heavily in their songs, or like when there's an ensemble song, kind of like those instruments will rise into prominence as like it's focused on certain characters, or like sometimes like when they're thinking about a certain character they'll have like that instrument come in, stuff like that.
That's really cool, actually.
That's a level of polish that's pretty cool in music. It's hard for me to do when I'm balancing other things, but it's the kind of thing that I think a dedicated composer is able to do. But yeah, motifs and like instruments for characters, those are always like interesting. Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess moving on to the next question. Why Analgesic Productions? Like, where does that name come from?
So you can't see this right now, but I actually have a mug that says Analgesic Productions.
Oh, really?
On it. I'm holding up the camera right now. Yeah, I do. It was in my the Analgesic Directs.
Okay. Does it have the new logo?
Yeah, it does.
Oh, nice.
I'm pointing to it right now, but just imagine it.
I'm imagining it.
Both the two of you.
Just to clarify for people watching, like I can't see either of them right now, but they're gonna send me the video later, so I'll see this later when I'm editing it.
It's very
we're
interesting
just like
texture for an interview.
Yeah.
giving James the finger right now.
and I will not see until I have these video files later.
We picked the name Anodyne first, and then when we released it, in order to get paid, we had to form a business.
Oh.
So the uncool story is that we kind of haphazardly just picked Analgesic Productions based on Anodyne's various definitions relating to like medicinal properties. But now I like to think of it as, well, you know, our games, to be a CEO for a second, our games offer a kind of unique perspective and unique atmosphere that can be sort of a healing, restorative, enriching experience. Here at Analgesic Productions, that's what we're dedicated to.
I definitely, I think you do achieve that well. I remember I was watching my friend play Michael. I was watching my friend Michael play Anodyne 2, and he got to avoid spoilers, I'll just say he got to the desert NPC part. And that part really, really resonated with him, because when he was younger, he had very like similar experiences of just kind of feeling like trapped in a way, and like seeing that experience kind of like recreated in a sense, like visually in like an interactive way. He kind of felt like it felt healing in a way, like as you put it, which is like a really interesting thing to kind of like harness that idea and kind of name the studio after it. Well, name the studio that first, and then kind of realize it kind of has that meaning later.
Justify it.
Also, justify it.
I think it's kind of a goofy name. Like it's hard to describe why, but I feel like, I don't know, analgesic. I mean, it's almost just a synonym with anodyne, but for whatever reason, saying Analgesic Productions, like it just like sounds like a studio. I mean, obviously adding
it does, it really does,
but like I don't know.
I'm glad we.
It just worked out well.
Could have. What if we picked something like Hyper Super Pixel Sphere or something like something like
well, who
unjustifiable?
knows? Maybe it would be even more popular.
That's a name that just completely clashes with the tone of your games. Completely.
But I guess like with so both Anodyne and Analgesic have these kinds of like sort of like double-sided qualities of things that could be good or bad. And so I kind of like how that fits into with what kind of like games are and what our creative work is, and that like you know, art in general is like a collaboration between the audience and the creator, and we can't necessarily make something that is like an inherent good or that will like definitely make your life better, but it has this opportunity to be used in different ways and to be interacted with in different ways, and you know, some people.
It actually reminds me Oh, not to interrupt that. If it sounds like we're constantly interrupting each other, it's because there's like a full 2 seconds of delay between each other. So, I have to ask because in the video I did about Anodyne, I said that Anodyne I referred to the drug Anodyne, but I know it has another meaning to be like disconnected from others or something like that. And I had a handful of people in the comments being like, actually it means this and not what you said. And I'm like, I don't think it matters that much. It's kind of the same thing. But which one of the two did you more prominently have in mind? Like, which definition?
I think Marina picked the title, right?
Yeah, I mean, so part of it was definitely, like, the fact that it was just this, like, cool-sounding word that, like...
Yeah.
Sounded like something that you've heard, but it's not so memorable that... I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
we kind of stole that word. Now it's ours. Whoops. But basically, I think I was always into the kind of, like, dual meaning, because the game Anodyne deals with themes of, like, escapism.
Yeah.
And so there's always that kind of, like, potential for something that is, like, a painkiller to be used in ways that are more or less helpful, and sometimes the distinction between those is kind of fuzzy.
Yeah.
In terms of what do we need, and like what helps us as human beings to like live our best life, and that can be like a confusing line to walk.
It definitely is. Like I know there's not like any one single interpretation of like a work of art or a video game or anything, but like that's kind of how I looked at Anodyne, was like him kind of realizing he doesn't need this escape and would rather like reconnect with the world. Like that could be related to people who like, you know, come off of antidepressants and kind of realize, oh, that's kind of been dulling my mind in a way that made it kind of harder to live life in a way. Maybe I need like a different kind of solution to that. And I've known people that have had like experiences like that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's like very dependent on like the person, and things interact with people's chemistry in very different ways.
Anodyne was interesting I mean, all games are kind of like this, but Anodyne, its vagueness in a way is kind of, I think, what helped it to spread.
Yeah.
A bit, because it resonated with so many people in different ways.
It definitely created conversation of people like trying to figure this thing out. Your games are definitely very different from like most games. You know, some people might even describe them as weird or strange. So what is it about exploring more surreal stories and art direction that appeals to you too?
I feel like the world is a very strange place, and I feel strange interacting with the world, and especially when I kind of grew up and was sort of like sheltered in a certain way, or had kind of a bit of like a cloistered experience. I was like homeschooled, and various other things that as I've like grown up and like kind of like gone to like college and lived as an adult, I feel like it's been a really interesting process of like seeing I don't know, like feeling kind of alien in a sense.
So you could almost say that like in Anodyne 2, a lot of people play that game and they see like these weird 3D like dolphin creatures and all these strange characters, and you're kind of almost like channeling the way like you kind of felt in just real life, like just being surrounded by people that kind of make you feel like, oh, this is definitely something I'm not super used to yet, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I guess like a lot of things that seem kind of totally bizarre or random are like very like specific references to things from my life or my childhood, or like conversations that I've had with people.
Yeah.
And so like it seems like the most bizarre thing because people don't have context for it necessarily. But then for me it's just like, oh yeah, that happened. Or like, and I think that's like a lot of that feeling of strangeness when like interacting with people is just like that they've like built up like assumption on assumption based on these different experiences, and it's kind of like everyone's gone down this rabbit hole, and then you like talk to someone else and they don't have all that context for why you're saying what you're saying at any given time, and it seems like so strange, and it's like, wow, like I would never say that. Like that's so
Yeah.
interesting.
It's like
And
everybody
so
has
it's
like
kind of
I was gonna say like everybody has a different butterfly effect of experiences that kind of make them
yeah.
the way they are, and because of that, like I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway.
But yeah, so that's
Yeah.
basically like the thing that I'm trying to like capture and heighten in a way is just like making things that feel very natural to me, but not explaining them like just this like barely enough so that people are
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah.
For me on surrealism, it's interesting Marina mentions like real life, because I just feel like, you know, as you go through, you know, life and you interact with various people in social groups, like teaching, when I was teaching in Chicago, it's like, okay, I have this group of students, I'm like teaching and I'm a teacher to them, and then I leave that, then I'm just a person walking around Chicago, like I go to the gas station and buy some like crappy food or
Yeah.
something. Then I'm just a random like guy in a gas station, and then you know, you go through the apartment, and the person at the front door, like, you know, maybe they have an impression of you. You go to your apartment, you meet a friend or whatever, meet your parents, and then in every single case, there's like, you have these different histories of different people and places, and that's just it's bizarre to think about how you're constantly switching. And I think that, you know, when it comes to representing these things in a game, surrealism can be kind of useful because, like, if you think about Anodyne 1 and 2, so Anodyne 2 has a very strong, like, story, but at the same time, it's structured in a way that we can kind of drop in, not totally random, but we can have a lot of variety in what happens,
Yeah.
but it still feels like it's together. And that lets us draw on a lot of different things from our lives, so we don't have to just, you know, the whole game doesn't have to fit into this coherent, like meticulously planned out world design,
Yeah.
right? Because we have that element of surrealism, we can kind of draw from experience A, experience B. And I think that's something that you can do, you know, it's fun to do in games because all you have to do to make an area in a game is just like make the art for it.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't have to worry about finding a location to shoot or like
Yeah.
or having to explain the transition very well. You
Yeah.
know, it's like you have a lot of flexibility there.
And then I think one more thing from in terms of like weirdness and being surreal, like it just like it comes so naturally to video games to be weird, because I don't know, I think there's probably a lot of reasons, but the way that like you're working with these abstracted systems and the fact that like the player has control with these limitations and they can like make like basically it's really hard and like it creates a lot of work to try to like make a world that feels like it's reacting realistically.
Yeah.
And so like there's going to be all these weird moments that happen anyway, and if you lean into those and lean into like the lack of like transitional matter or detail that would make something feel like it's accurately capturing the real world or something,
Yeah.
then you can kind of bring out these really special qualities that you don't get from just living in the real world.
So it's also sort of like it's also something that you more so like just as two people making stuff together. You also have like more so the resources to do that. You can make like very strange like sprite work or 3D models, like where like studios like Naughty Dog, it takes like 300 employees to make like a photorealistic game. So it's just also something that's like more viable to lean into, and then just you get more like crazy with it that way.
Yeah. You can be more improvisational, and something I was thinking about, I saw you just bought Death Stranding,
Yeah,
right?
I was
Not
playing
Marina.
it a bunch yesterday. Oh, I didn't. Okay, but yeah, I've been playing it too. Yeah.
So something I noticed was that the trailers they released, you know how some of those clips are in very early on in the actual game,
Yeah.
and it was interesting that basically they have not changed at all since those trailers like 2 or 3 years ago, and I think that's kind of indicative of how some aspects of like AAA games have to be kind of set in stone before anything else can move forward.
Yeah.
So that means basically they had the story planned out like a long time ago, and I'm guessing from then till release they were basically polishing the main gameplay of Death Stranding or whatever, delivering stuff.
Yeah.
But when you're working on a smaller game, I mean, you do have to plan stuff out to an extent, but just when you're in a smaller team, you have more flexibility to kind of go down these like strange routes or whatever. So like,
Yeah.
The spoilery parts of Anodyne 2, those kind of things were, they kind of existed as ideas throughout development, but didn't really get totally planned out until like halfway through or 3/4 through development.
Yeah. One thing I absolutely hate about Death Stranding, that is something I do appreciate a lot about your games, is that game is very unsubtle with its themes. Like, it has this theme of reconnecting the world, which I think it does amazingly well through the gameplay. Indirectly connecting everyone's games. Like, you're seeing structures other players have built, and you can, give them likes to interact with it in these very indirect ways. Yet the story just beats you over the head with that. They'll just say the phrase, "We need to reconnect the world," over and over. They give the character this phobia of interacting with other humans because, get it? We're disconnected. The president's name is Bridget. Get it? Like a bridge. Like the company name is Bridges because we're connecting people. But not to be like, I don't know, but like I appreciate games that are a little more subtle with the themes because there's like a lot more. It feels more satisfying to kind of put the pieces together instead of them just sitting there telling you this is the theme, this is what you should take from it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely indicative of like how that game was produced. It must have been the design of the gameplay like worked out really well, but then you still have that story that repeats the same like symbolic names over.
Yeah. I think like one thing that, for example, like Anodyne 2 like has, I think like we have a lot of motifs, I guess, or kind of this contrasting idea of like motifs and themes, and like sometimes we can like lean into a motif without that necessarily, like you still have to interpret it, like to like understand or to like have an opinion on like what the themes are. And so like it's fun to like have kind of recurring elements, but then like there's a layer underneath that of like, oh, but it's kind of complicated to like tell what exactly that means.
A little more like putting the pieces together, and that's like that's a satisfying experience because it gives your brain a little bit of a workout. Like, it leaves you with more to think about. But when they sit there and just tell you what it is, then it kind of leaves much less of an impression, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, it's more of a conversation. Like, things tend to affect people more when they're able to kind of have to bring a part of their experience into it to comprehend or make sense of what's going on, I think.
And again, it definitely does create conversation. Like, I remember when I was doing that video on the first Anodyne game, it was so easy to find people talking about that thing on forums.
Oh yeah. Like, there's
even it just being a smaller game that not as many people obviously are going to be playing Anodyne than Death Stranding, a AAA, widespread game. Yet there's still not maybe just as much conversation, but like a lot of conversation surrounding it as well.
It's always cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
People.
Yeah.
The Discord.
Yeah.
Shout out to Discord. Hi everyone.
Shout out.
Yeah. The Discord is fun.
I wish I was a young human playing analgesic games during my formative gaming years. Although I played some.
Do you think if you could I was gonna say, do you think if you could go back in time and play your own work completely blind, how interesting of an experience would that be?
It'd be pretty interesting.
If I had played those games when I was like in high school, I think my mind would have been blown.
Especially knowing like this is something that you would create at some point.
How did I travel in time?
We would have to like save our child selves from like a calamity in order to like ensure that Anodyne would exist. Anodyne is like slowly fading from existence.
We're spoiling Anodyne 3.
It's just like a parody of Back to the Future where you keep pulling out the photograph and like the game itself is fading from existence. And then, like, if the players don't succeed, you delete it off of Steam and it's gone forever.
You take your money, but you don't get the game back.
Yeah. So it's like interesting stuff like that you just can't do as like a AAA developer because you're with a company and this thing needs to make money. So I guess that's like another reason like independents have much more creative freedom that way. For example, you have the creative freedom to make a rabbit take 2 hours to walk across the screen. Why?
Yeah.
What, please tell us about that. Why did you need to include that in the game? Why do that to everybody?
I'm you can't see this, but I'm saying sorry. I'm like putting my hands together on the screen. There is just this like so the game's done in like January 2013, and I'm like, okay, well, I need some like secret things, right? We need some Easter eggs, and then I was inspired. I might have talked about this a bit, but I was inspired by Braid's super obscure stars, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna do my own spin on that. And some of the ideas were kind of interesting for the squares. I think I can't really remember, but one of them, I don't know. There's just something. There's something funny about the rabbit thing. It's just kind of like a. I mean, it's kind of cruel in retrospect. Like, I don't think I would have made it so long now, but it's kind of mean. But imagine that it's shorter. If it's shorter, then it's kind of like a funny joke, right? It's kind of like, oh, you know, the rabbit kind of makes fun of you throughout the game.
Especially how like when you're waiting for it, it's like going at a reasonable pace until halfway. It starts taking like 10 minutes to go 1 pixel forward. So you like think it's not. You don't realize it's gonna take that long until it's halfway across the screen. I actually pranked I pranked my friend Michael. I was watching him play Anodyne over Discord for the first time, and he got to that part. I'm like, because he beat the game and he was trying to find all the secrets. So I was like, oh yeah, you gotta wait for that rabbit to go across. He's like, how long does it take? And I was like, yeah, like 10 minutes. And he was sitting there for like the full 2 hours just groaning. I was like, yeah, it's almost there, don't worry. He was so mad at me for making him sit through that.
The green square.
You had to share the pain.
Share the pain. Pain of the rabbit.
But honestly,
yeah, that would have been a good joke if it was like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But,
I do.
Well, but then we wouldn't be talking.
That's true. That's true.
And it would have just been a good joke. It wouldn't have been like an exciting mistake.
I do love stuff like that though. Like it, actually doing it kind of sucks. But like the idea of these ridiculous things you put in the game just to see if people even find it is something I'm always in love with. Because again, that creates conversation online. It's like people trying to figure these things out, and when people do figure it out, then that's like a really satisfying thing.
And it does kind of like play into the like broader experience of the game, in terms of like expectations of the like relationship that you have between the developer and the player, and like kind of like what lengths you're willing to go to in the like how in what ways is this world real to you? Like what kind of like space does it occupy in your head?
Yeah. Like some people are very dedicated to like even the simplest of things. Like getting a number to 100% is like meaningless in real life, but as long as it's just something you want to do, then it can mean everything to you. The example I always use is like when Tony Hawk, this is going to sound weird, but when Tony Hawk first did the 900, it's like, why would that matter to him so much? Like turning around on a skateboard a couple of times. Yeah. But it was only important because it was important to him, because it was important to that narrow community at the time. Like, this is just a thing nobody's done. I just want to do it, you know?
Meaning in communities.
Yeah. So in that same area, there's also this like super horny bear that tells you about how many times he's had intercourse. Mm-hmm. Marina, Sean told me that was your idea.
Yep.
Why?
What I'm curious. Do you remember how like the moment that you interacted with the bear and what it felt like?
I remember just because I remember I cycled through a couple of different dialogues that were much less strange, and then he just burst that one out. Especially the bear's name is James too, which was like, oh, the bear's named after me.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking about that when you tweeted the screenshot. I was like on my lunch break. I was like, oh my god, his name is James too. I was like,
So the reason for the bear is that it was actually named after you. No.
That's right.
I was gonna say that game came out before like I was even really on YouTube, I think.
We can
Yeah,
travel
no,
through
I was
time.
watching your 7th grade videos.
Oh my
No,
God.
okay, that's really gross.
It was named after James Blonde.
No, so basically, that's definitely sticks out to people as a memorable part. If you scroll through the Steam forums, that's like frequently screenshotted.
Yeah.
But I guess, I mean, in some ways it's very simple. Like, it goes back to what I was saying about kind of like the alienness of other people and like context. And so like basically the idea behind that was just like this bear being part of his bear culture or whatever is just like doesn't really think differently about talking about sex versus talking about how he likes berries. The way that he talks about those things is like just the same. It's like talking about how much he loves berries and then like how many berries he's had and then how much sex he's had. And so like it's only like coming at him from this totally other perspective that like the two things sound totally different and weird.
Yeah.
And like one is weird and one is normal.
Like if this was completely normal until he said it to somebody from a different ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that's kind of part of the broader way that I was thinking about writing the characters, although that was more of like an imagined one, maybe.
Yeah. Well, definitely
into
stuck
minds.
out, especially if that many people screenshotted it. I think it's good just to have like those weird, funny things to like catch the player off guard, like especially that was the first thing in the game where it's like, okay, this is no longer an E-rated game, because that game could have been like very family friendly until like just for like a handful of things like that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's honestly like, it's definitely like risky from a like selling standpoint, like marketability standpoint.
Yeah.
In a way that because like in a way that would be hard to go back to, I think now, because at the time we weren't thinking about being on consoles and getting an ESRB rating and stuff like that. Like it was just like, oh, we're just doing this thing for fun. This is not our like career.
Yeah.
And so we were able to do stuff that like doesn't really make sense insofar as like the game is generally not like that, but then at like random points like a character will say fuck or something and it's like it's like, oh, that's like not an efficient way to like package the like correct age demographic.
It's so funny
content,
because that reminds me of a joke I think Angry Video Game Nerd did like 10 years ago, where he's like, that would be like if Sonic the Hedgehog was rated M because of one sign that said fuck, but that's literally Anodyne.
Yeah.
Like that's literally Anodyne.
But in some ways, like those few moments punch really hard because they
do.
They like break the kind of dynamic range that you've come to expect.
Yeah,
from, like,
it's like 0 to 100 in like that specific category in a way that like you physically feel it. So that's pretty much all the questions I got, but we do have some more questions from Twitter. One guy asks, how well did Anodyne do on Switch compared to the PC version? Which is an interesting question because I hear indie games have been doing like gangbusters on Switch.
It probably would have done really well if it had come out like early, like super early in the Switch.
Yeah, if it came out earlier, that would have been better. But it has still done well enough to have been worth the investment.
Right on.
Yeah, I can't really say more details than that. Or else Mario will come for me. But yeah, it's been worth being on, and definitely I hope even the Ocean comes out soon.
Yeah.
And Anodyne too.
Yeah, well, that was that. Well, there's the answer to the next question. Someone just asked, "Is Anodyne 2 going to be on Switch?" But I guess that's
Yes,
definite. Hopefully, I guess
contracts have been signed, and like it's being localized to some languages, and then it'll be handed over to the porters who will get it working on Switch.
Okay, that thing was made in Unity, wasn't it?
Yeah, so Anodyne 2, even the Ocean has been having some trouble because it uses like a open source engine that, like an old version of this engine, and stuff is broken. But like for Anodyne 2, it's Unity, which is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I know it's a lot easier to port your games if it's made in like, I know Game Maker games are super easy to port to Switch. I hear I saw somebody take Undertale and literally just replace the exe, just to see if it works, and it just boots. You literally just need that same wrapper, and then it just works.
Wow,
it's pretty crazy.
Wow,
that's cool.
Yeah. Another question. This guy says that they very much admire how unapologetic you guys are with the weirdness, like the story, the gameplay, and the art, and it works. They don't think that many games have that sort of confidence to be that weird. Do you ever like doubt yourselves or think maybe this is too out there, or do you just like, no, we'll just do this and don't really think much about it?
Something ever too out there.
Like, did you think twice about making Fuck Bear and Anodyne, or was that just like?
I don't think we usually. Yeah, I mean, especially at this point where, like, doing that has been, like, successful for us. Like, it's kind of like a thing that makes this unique, but also, like, I don't know, a lot of, I guess, like I was saying, like, a lot of things, it's more about clarity, I guess, is sometimes we'll have discussions about whether something communicates thematically enough, or like whether it benefits from more or less vagueness, and that is like adjacent to weirdness in that the less someone understands something, the weirder it feels. Whereas if something is like kind of theoretically very weird, but you explain it a lot, then it's like normalized.
So you're thinking more about how it functions rather than just like how weird is this? It's more so like how will this like come across, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some parts that walk a tricky line and like feel weirder because they're not explained. And I think one thing that comes across as like maybe the weirdness is calibrated funny is the Guams in Anodyne 2, which is the like worm creatures in the alleyway.
Yeah.
And I think that is often an especially confusing or weird part for people, whereas like for me writing it, it's like very specific, and like they're all like basically all that dialogue is like Peanuts, Charlie Brown references. That,
really?
I read a lot of like Peanuts, and I was like really into it, and read a lot about like Charles Schultz and stuff when I was younger, and so there's like a bunch of like weird references that for some, I mean, it's kind of part of the themes of the character, and like that I wanted to explore. But that's a funny one where I feel like the weirdness is calibrated very funny based on your knowledge of Peanuts.
That is really, really fascinating.
I had no idea it was like nothing. Basically until we shipped, I couldn't understand any of it. I mean, I could understand it in like a thematic sense, but not like the full like oh, the auger is. First of all, I didn't realize that was a pun, but this happens a lot actually.
There's so many not explained puns, which like Sean doesn't know about until people talk about it in Discord.
That's interesting.
Like, not again.
That's gotta be so wild, like not even understanding things in your own game until other people point it out to you. You're like, oh, that's why that's that way.
Yeah, it kind of happens with like dialogue and stuff. Yeah, as far as weirdness goes, it's like when brainstorming ideas, I guess, you know, just write everything down that comes to mind, and like if something seems like it fits in, you know, as long as it's not like super distracting or not like, you can fit it into the themes of the game as a whole and communicate it well, I think it'd be okay. But
as long as it feels like it belongs there.
Yeah. Like, but you know, I wouldn't like, probably wouldn't put into a character that just starts like yelling explicitive. Maybe I wouldn't, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it depends a lot on for one thing, it depends on how it's contextualized. So, like in Anodyne 2, there's the 3D worlds and the 2D worlds, and so you would put different kinds of weirdness in different parts of the game,
Yeah.
depending on kind of like what makes the story function.
Yeah, that's a good. I was gonna say that's a good spot to bring up another question. Someone says like, "What's it like working in 3D versus working in 2D?" Especially, especially a game that has both of them combined.
Yep. I just want to mention an example of a weird thing that we didn't get around to or got cut. Like, there's a certain extent that we didn't go to, and one of them in Anodyne 2, I just remembered this. I don't know if I told Marina, but like, I had an idea where like you would have to like watch a fake YouTube ad and then answer a multiple choice question about it in the game to like proceed, but it wouldn't really matter if you got it right or not.
Okay.
And maybe one of them involved like fake credit card. And anyways,
You should have
but that's
done that.
like
That sounds like
you know,
that sounds
I don't
so
remember
fun.
we'll save it for Anodyne. But that's the kind of thing like, oh, it's like a crazy idea, but I can't figure out how to really like.
That reminds me of Dujana did something fourth wall breaking-ish like that, where like there's a part when like you click on a TV and suddenly this Let's Player appears like on webcam at the bottom right of the screen and starts like commentating on the game as you play it, and it's just so weird and hilarious.
Oh, that's really smart. Yeah, I've had ideas about that too. That's a good idea. Like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, the 2D and 3D. I think Marina explained this more clearly when we get this question.
Yeah, okay. So there's definitely like this general narrative that we've developed as we've thought about this, and it's like basically we do what works well in each mode, or that's how we did it for Anodyne 2, based on like our skill sets and also like how things function. And so what works really well for us in terms of like, and when we were thinking about doing the 3D and messing around with that early on, it was like, oh wow, compared to when we were working on Even the Ocean, it's really easy in a sense to create this sense of exploration.
Yeah.
Because the player, through controlling the character, controls the camera, and they're able to see things from, like, create their own compositions with different perspectives, and things can be hidden behind other things in a way that feels very natural, and it's, like, very akin to exploring space in real life. And whereas in 2D, everything is very what you see is what you get, and in order to create exploration, you have to like create every single view that the player can see, in a sense.
It's almost as if like the developer is more in control with 2D, where 3D the player is more so in control of what they see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so just creating this sense of a space where like something might be hidden around and you wouldn't like instantly know or not know, kind of.
Yeah.
Is very, very natural in 3D, and it's you just like throw a few objects around and instantly it's like, oh, I can kind of explore. And that was something that was like really hard in Anodyne 1 and Even the Ocean. And then like on the flip side, what is very hard, especially for a small team, to do in 3D is like very tight kind of idea-based puzzles. Where like, because of the like physics that would be involved, or the like complications that would be involved in the nuance of the space. And so that is very simple to do in this grid-based 2D. A lot of like form and function working together there, where the puzzles can be simple and like based around the concept of a grid or something like that.
Yeah.
And then when you're making the art, it's just like, oh, like it's just intertwined here, how it looks and what it'll communicate. And so we basically just notice these patterns and then like split up the exact things you do into those, like whatever worked well for us. So with the like 3D exploring and then the 2D puzzles basically was very like a form and function decision.
Okay. Do you think is your next game going to be 3D as well?
Yes.
In some ways, it's also going to be 3D and 2D. but
Okay.
not quite in the same way as Anodyne 2.
So you won't be using.
Yeah, not in-
Will you be using like the same kind of like low poly art style?
Probably. Yeah.
It might. The 2D is going to be more HD, right?
Yeah. I think in general it'll probably be more HDE.
I've never heard the phrase HDE before. Yet I know precisely what you mean.
Like, we might not do the, like, intentionally low res, like, for the 3D parts. Like, I don't know if we'll do that again. Maybe.
We know like how the game is split into 3D and 2D stuff, but the exact art specifications are TBD.
Yeah.
Okay.
Haven't gotten that
So
deep
you're
in.
still you're kind of still like on the drawing board for a lot of this stuff here.
Yeah, mostly
What are the
just
visual
working through
side of?
writing
Yeah, we don't want to spoil too much, but like
Yeah.
and
some of
design.
parts are very like decided, and some parts are I think mostly visually.
One thing I
When I
really like,
started.
one thing I liked about Anodyne 2 is like 3D, and I can say this for like a lot of indie games are kind of doing this like retro-ish look, but since it's like modern 3D graphics, you can do a lot of stuff with it you actually couldn't do on a PS1. And this question kind of tackles that. Where did it go? But yeah, this guy asked like, how did you use like modern video game effects, like the reflections off of water, despite the game having like PS1 style graphics?
So we didn't stick to exact technical specifications. It was more about thinking about like the feeling of those games and trying to port those feelings into kind of like a modern day
Yeah.
take on that visual medium.
Yeah.
And so stuff that wouldn't have existed on the PlayStation we did use when it seemed to fit visually, like fake water or something.
Yeah, I mean, I did a interview with a local podcast called the Nice Games Club.
Yeah.
And we focused on talking about kind of like what lo-fi meant to us. And so basically like the gist was that we talked about there was kind of that lo-fi to us means like a lo-fi process where things are like, we do things based on like our skills and the tools that we have available in order to like work with kind of like a lightness and an efficiency. And so we definitely come from very much from an angle of not like trying to capture an exact thing meticulously, but just like, what do I have here, both in myself and around me, that I can like use in a way that is like simple with those elements.
That is a really interesting way of like putting it, because like that's why those games look that way back in the day, because that's just what they had to work with.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
like that's a really cool way of doing it, instead of like specifically trying to recreate visual style. More so it's like, what do we have and what can we do, and that's why this thing looks this way. That's kind of like a more genuine method of harnessing that, I guess, in a way. That's like really cool, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and then like as far as I do wish that like honestly that either I knew more or that it was easier to play with certain things such as the water. Like I found it I didn't like research that much because it's just like dealing with so many different things, but I found it really difficult to actually like customize the water and like how it looked through kind of like basic Unity stuff. And obviously like that can be like a whole rabbit hole of like water shaders. And
I was kind of just like, forget it, let's just use two transparent planes and move the texture. It's just like, I don't know.
yeah.
Stuff like that. Water shaders always come to my mind. I'm just like, I'm getting older. Can we just find something that works, or do we have to think about this for like 3 days?
I mean, it did work. It does look good. I would
you.
say, at least.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess it's like, yeah, I mean, we definitely benefit though from a lot of people who are interested, who are drawn to like the kind of like really specific things and are willing to like work on those and put in that like effort. And then we're like, thanks. Blah. But yeah.
Here's another question. Have you guys ever experienced a point where like the themes within your works are like a little bit too much to work with, in the sense of like you began uncomfortable with it or it affected your daily routines?
I'm having a bit of that right now with the current narrative I'm working on, but so I'm trying to scale back certain aspects of it, but that would be kind of, it's basically the current game we're working on, it's kind of like set in reality, and so to do a good job of that context, I've been having to do a lot of like reading of like historical stuff, and it's kind of overwhelming in some ways.
Yeah.
But that's like a recent example.
I feel like kind of no, in the sense that, well, no, yeah, I mean, it's more like the other way around, where like sometimes I'll be tackling stuff that was debilitating, or I'll be tackling stuff while I'm feeling debilitated in some sense, but then the act of creating is not the thing that like makes it hard generally for me, and like it usually makes things easier in the rest of my life. And so a lot of the time it'll be something that I've like gone through a lot of processing already in order to like sort of know what direction I want to take it in terms of expressing artistically. But then occasionally I'll do something while I'm kind of in the moment. I made a game called Brativism that is like very much like, it was like a very short, like 5-minute game that expresses certain like feelings or emotions that I was feeling while I was making it. But then like it helped because of how much like I like doing art and how it's like rewarding to me. So then I was like, this helped me.
I know some people that have had like kind of negative experiences in their life, when they explore that through like an artistic medium, it's almost like therapeutic in a way, like they're finally getting that out of their system in a way for some people. Yeah. Okay. All right. Another one we have. This guy asks, what do you guys do when you've worked so long on one thing and you get a little burnt out from it and you don't want to work on it anymore? Does that ever happen?
In our games, it helps that we have different roles. So like for music, I'll work on a lot of music one day, and then the next day I can do some programming.
Yeah.
And that's the nice thing about, it's hard when you're working on a solo game because you have to switch between like 5 different things, but when you're working on a team of 2, it's like, okay, you kind of have these 2 main things you can focus on.
Yeah, switching between just a couple main things is really nice.
Okay.
Also, doing other things in real life really helps.
Oh, yeah. I definitely remember towards the end of Anodyne 2, when I just needed to make like a ton of art, I definitely like kind of like got by being like, work really hard on a 2D area, and now I'm like sick of doing that, and then I would do like 3D modeling and stuff like that. Then I would get sick of that and just like switch back and forth to get through that like final push.
And there's kind of like a variety in the workload. It's like you don't get as sick of it because you're not doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah, it's like a very different process. So.
Yeah, it was like, I'll fix some camera bugs for the thousandth time. Then I'll fix these controller bugs, and then maybe I'll write this really boring script for a cutscene or something. Or like, I don't mean, not like writing script, but like
the coding
making the stuff move on the screen and stuff.
Yeah.
My God, I can't believe any of that stuff works, but it does.
Yeah, I imagine it's like not an easy thing to do. Like I could not even wrap my head around coding. I tried to make games in Game Maker when I was in middle school, and the best thing I made was a really shitty Space Invaders clone, but with Kirby.
Like, Kirby's cool.
Yeah, but even like the most easy thing was like such a challenge. It's like, it's difficult. It's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like,
like
almost all things. I'm honestly like amazed at everything that everyone does. Like just like living life. Like, I go around and
Yeah.
being like, oh, like, you have, like, this kind of job? Like, I can't even fathom that. Or, like, oh, you, like, raise children? Like, that's a lot.
Yeah, I feel
Or,
the same way. Like I have a friend with a child. I have another friend who has a house. It's like, how do you even achieve these things?
yeah. And I
Yeah.
guess, like, the weird thing about life is that, like, when you're in it, it just, like, you find a way to make it make sense. I mean, obviously, sometimes you don't, and then it's really hard, but
Yeah.
um, it feels so different being on the inside of a life versus being on the outside. And so I guess that's both a way that I think about things that helps me I don't know, like simultaneously respect the things that other people are capable of while also not making it feel so alien to myself that I like can't relate to them.
Yeah.
Because it's like I know that if I was in their shoes that like I would like it would feel different than it does from the outside.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very
All right.
interesting.
So one more we have here. I guess we'll do one more. This is about budgeting. So they're asking like experience and living expenses aside, can you estimate like a minimum budget you would need for a solo developer to make something like a 3D platformer or 3D game? Does any of it go towards coding and making it function, or is it entirely spent on visuals, audio, and style?
Oh, that's
Bit of a tricky one.
basically impossible to answer.
Yeah.
There's okay. Well, if you assume that you can already do all of them at like a capacity that you can generate the stuff you need in a reasonable amount of time, like you're not learning how to write music, you can like go and write a song if you need to. It all depends on scale of the game and like basically just the scale of the game. You know, whether that be
Well, and your
it's an hour long
life
and
expenses.
everything in the game has like a ridiculous amount of like detail to it, or if it's 10 hours long and there's a lower level of detail to everything. But not only that, but also just like how you're choosing to schedule things out, your standards for yourself. Like some people are very they play test the game constantly, or they have certain compromises they're not willing to make, and that can drag out development.
Yeah.
So you could make a 3D platformer by yourself in a month if you want to, or you could let it take 10 years. But
You can do
I would
something in
say that
between.
like, yeah, if like, as far as money goes, I don't know. I mean, you can do all the things for free. It's just, it's more like technically, as long as you can pay for all your living expenses, I guess it's, oh,
Yeah.
it's the cost of living to make a game, but at the same time, you're trading that time of development. It's kind of a risk, right?
Yeah,
You'd
it's
be
not
doing
so
something
much.
else.
It's not so much that like you need to pay to get these things done. It's like you need to pay to have the time to do these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise you're not working another job, or you're not you're paying for like food and rent and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think one quick thing that we have been started to think about the more experience we've had making games is just like having a sense of how our ideas expand as we like work with them. Because basically like Anodyne, the initial concept was a lot smaller than where it ended up. And so when we moved into Even the Ocean, we had this experience of like, oh, we'll make a game kind of like the size of Anodyne. And then like it became larger than that because
Yeah.
we were like, we forgot that the concept of Anodyne was much smaller. And so with Anodyne 2, we like really, even though it was very hard to want to, we tried to like simplify the initial idea. And then it naturally expands as you have ideas in relation to the ideas that you're like having, because you explore
Yeah.
something and you're like, oh, this brings up this logical kind of like continuation of certain mechanics or certain ideas.
Yeah.
And so just like, I guess watching yourself, because your calibration as a creator will be different than ours, but I guess watching yourself for patterns of like the way and the amount that your ideas scale, and like either making peace with that by starting smaller, or like by being stricter with how much you allow those ideas to expand. Just kind of like that kind of project blooming is something to like be aware of and embrace, but also like know that it
Something
can
definitely to be
affect.
mindful of, to make sure it doesn't go like out of control
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah. All right, so I guess that's pretty much it for all the questions we got here. Is there any like final thoughts you two want to kind of spit out there before we wrap this thing up?
Thank you for watching our games on this channel.
Yeah.
It's always really cool. There's always a lot of good comments on the video reviews you have. Not just Anodyne, but like the other. Like, I'm sort of talking to you and also the viewers, but yeah, it's a pretty good like community of commenters here, and it's always fun when we have a video, one of our games, to kind of go through them, or like any of the other games that are posted on it.
Yeah, that is one thing I do really like about YouTube comments, is reading like through all of these people that notice things I didn't notice, or like have little different perspectives on it, and they're like, oh, this is also this way, and it's like definitely worth reading each and every time.
Yeah.
Thanks
All right.
so much.
Yeah, so thanks for you two coming on and doing this interview. I think that was like a lot of fun, just talking about stuff. Yeah,
thank you for having us. That was good.
Yeah, not a problem. All right, one last thing, do you want to like plug what you're currently working on, where people can follow that?
You can follow us on Twitter in the links below. I'm just assuming there's going to be links below.
Yeah, I'll put them down there.
The best way to follow us is on Twitter. I'm at SeanHTCH, which I want to change, but I'll never get around to it. It's SEAN_HTCH.
Yep, and I'm at EVEN_KEI.
And I'll have
Yeah,
both
and
of those down below.
And my Twitter is very quiet right now. Probably later in development we'll be posting more stuff.
I mean, early on, you don't really have much to show, so that's
right now
that
we're
makes sense.
basically in like planning and pre-production, so like writing the script and like prototyping, and so there's not really any final art.
So
a lot of Word documents and
it's mostly very mysterious and unannounced, but it'll be really exciting and very different than anything we've done before. Both with
I'm excited to see it, because I love what you guys have done so far, and I'm always looking forward to like the new stuff you guys are putting out.
Sean is bringing a lot of interesting kind of, like he hinted, it's a lot more directly tied to the real world, and kind of like broader like social and cultural structures that I tend to write a lot more about, like individual one-on-one relationships, and so that'll be really different. And then we also have this really interesting puzzle grid battle system thingy that is super different than normally. We just have like kind of action mechanics forming the meat of the game, so it'll be really
so it's definitely a fresh design challenge.
Well, I'm definitely excited to see it. But thanks you two for coming on, and thanks everybody for watching this interview. And I guess the end. I don't know how to end these things, but
thank you.
We'll just kind of fade out as I ramble and don't know how to end a video.